I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the upcoming book, Working in Sleepers, no other than Mr. Ken Taylor. Welcome, Mr. Ken. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Thank you, Daniel. I'm grateful to be here. I am Ken Taylor, and I have been in and out of technology startups for my whole life. My father was in that world when I was young, crawling around in between his servers. And through that time, I've seen a lot of different things, a lot of changes in technology and in working styles. And I think we all experienced a very huge change a few years ago when everybody had to go work from home that was possibly able to do it. I was involved in a startup at that point that was just getting going. I was the third employee, and we were trying to scale and bring on more people. And then with the pandemic, there was we couldn't do offices. So we developed the techniques to build a fully remote company, and we grew that to 40 people over the years that I was with them, while a lot of other companies were wrestling with that as well. And that is what my book is about: how to build a fully remote company when you have people working in their offices, presumably in slippers or sandals, as the case may be. But you need to be able to do business effectively and efficiently, even when they're not in the office physically with you all the time. And I know that's something that's a common source of confusion right now. There's a lot of people that are wanting to bring their employees back to the office, and a lot of workers that would really rather not have to deal with the commute. And I think there's some techniques that I learned by hard experience that are very valuable that I wanted to share with the people, both with managers and leadership and employees as well, that are wrestling with the world that we live in today and the changes in it. So that's what my book is all about.
Mr. Ken Taylor, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. Working in Sleepers. Tell us what it's all about.
Well, one thing that I have discovered through the course of the needing to build a company remotely is, as you've heard, most companies they nowadays will say that their people are their most important asset. That's a very common statement. If you are going to be working remotely, that is even more true than it is in a company in the office, because the individual people and their quality, their work ethic, their character, their abilities is vitally important when they are working in their own back bedroom or their back shed in the garden, as the case may be. They don't have somebody that is there with them looking over their shoulder. And that's an uncomfortable feeling for many managers. Many managers don't know how to manage people when they can't physically look at them. But anybody that's ever worked in an office probably realizes there are ways to look busy, look efficient, look effective when they're not really doing any actual work. Even when I was a kid, there was the hide the boss is coming button on the computer that you could put that would pop up a quick spreadsheet and hide the game that you were playing previously. So just because you're in an office doesn't mean you're being productive. Just because you're not in an office doesn't mean you're being unproductive. What's essential is for managers to invest more time in the selection of their workers to get the very best people. There are some people that lean into work. There are some people that have a natural sense of diligence that want to work hard as long as they're given the tools with which to do so. And it's vitally important to invest the necessary time to find those people and get them in the right place. But at the same time, the very best employee is not going to be able to do a good job if they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. There's a saying that we've probably all heard: expect what you inspect. What are the measurements for each worker? If you are an employee, do you know exactly what is expected of you by your boss? If you're a boss, do each of your employees know what is expected of them? Or do you say a large thing, but you only look at one very small, confined aspect of their job? Well, if that's what you look at, that's what people are going to concentrate on. It's human nature. We all know that we want to concentrate on what's going to make the teacher happy or the boss happy, as the case may be. So, setting up what those things are, what the structures to know what the work that is being done, being that is being done in the correct way, that is being done promptly, that is being done with quality, That is essential in order to make sure that you're aligning what the workers are doing with what you want done. But then you get a virtue of that, because once you have established what needs to be done, then a lot of the proxies that we use to pretend to do that no longer matter. So we can think of the old school way of, well, did you arrive at the office on time? Did you clock in at 8:59 or 9:01? You were 1 minute late. Did you clock out at 4:59? You're leaving 1 minute early. Well, if what you're measuring is the work that is being done, then the precise time becomes less relevant. And that presents the opportunity for something that is so very rare in the employer employee relationship. And that is a win win, something that benefits both sides. If you have the opportunity for workers to be a little bit more flexible, say they need to cut out for an hour in the afternoon to pick up their kid from school, but then they just work an hour later to get the work done. Is the work getting done? Yes. Is it being done to the standard that's required? Yes, it is. Does the fact that they stepped out for an hour make any difference? Well, no. In many jobs, it really doesn't. So the employee has received a major benefit, the ability to spend some time with their child at a convenient time for them. Doesn't cost the company a cent, but it makes the employee much, much happier. And there are many other aspects of this to remote work. There's the obvious of not having to fight your way through traffic in the commute and get to the office stressed out, and then get home even more stressed out after dealing with the stall up traffic for an hour in each direction. Again, that's something that doesn't cost the company anything to allow. It gives an employee a huge incentive, not only in the time that's saved, but in they don't have to pay for gas, they don't have to pay for parking. In these times where there's a lot of challenging economic situations and a lot of companies don't have the money, there's not a lot of raises necessarily. Well, that's a raise that's very significant that doesn't cost anything on the bottom line.
Mr. Ken, the title both relatable and proactive. What does working sleepers symbolize about the deeper shift in work culture beyond just the dress code?
Well, it symbolizes the ability for people to work in the way that is most comfortable and productive for them personally, that might potentially annoy somebody else if they were in the same office. Do you prefer to work in a nice, hot, warm environment? Do you prefer to have it cold so your brain is sharp? Do you like to have music playing? Do you like to have it dead quiet? Do you concentrate better if you have your cat or your dog with you? Many of those things you can't really do in an office, or if you do, you might likely annoy somebody else. In a home office, it doesn't matter. I, for example, have a nice fuzzy cat sitting on the office next to me. If you're allergic to cats, that is not going to bother you at all. You can't see her, but she is here. I could make her meow and tell you that she was. I'm sure many people can sympathize that they're more productive, or if they're having a stressful meeting, it might be helpful for them to be able to reach out and pet a fuzzy kitten, or pet their dog in a way that you're never going to do that in a normal office, but in a
Yeah.
home office, you can.
What was the specific moment or trend that made you realize that the virtual company model was no longer a temporary experiment but a permanent new normal worthy of a book?
Well, when we were coming out of the pandemic, by the time we had reached that point, the company had grown significantly. And by the nature of being virtual, we had picked the best employees wherever we happened to find them. And we realized they lived all over the country in many different time zones. How could we possibly put them into an office? Are we going to pay for them all to move across the country so they can be in one particular city, and then we're going to pay thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars for an office space to put them in? It made no sense whatsoever. So, given that we already had the core of the company that was spread out, living and working wherever they happened to be, we had already developed the tools to do that. It didn't make sense to change to do anything else. We simply continue the way in which we had begun that was working so effectively.
Effectively, indeed. And while COVID accelerated, your book suggests the shift is fundamental. What long term technological and cultural trends made this shift inevitable?
Well, I think that we see a significant difference in the generations. Hopefully, I look youthful, but I must admit I am not a member of Gen Z. Generation Z is younger than I am. Uh, those of us that are familiar with Generation Z, we know there's a big difference there. They're always on their phones. There's the stereotype, and it's not entirely accurate, but we think of the stereotype of them all sitting on couches talking to each other, but not physically. They're chatting on their phones, even though they're just a few feet away from each other. But that's how they have learned to interact because they grew up in a world of being always connected, always on. They always have their smartphone with them, and that's just how they're used to dealing with people. So for them to be forced into an office, there are certainly benefits to that under certain circumstances, but it's a bit of an alien environment for them. We realize that in many cases, catering to the strengths of a particular group of people, of employees, can be beneficial. Sometimes they need to learn other skills, that's true. But is that necessary for everybody? Well, if your job is to deal with customers in the flesh, then yes, you probably do need to be there. But if your job is going to be just staring at a computer screen all day, anyways, does it really matter where that is? And if the people, such as we see with Gen Z, are comfortable and accustomed to relating with others, with friends, with family through a computer screen, there's not really a huge difference for them to do in a remote situation because they will have a chat. It's similar to what they're used to with the text. So as we see more and more Gen Z and whatever the next generation is, we know that this is part of their culture. This is how they're used to operating. They will be a larger and larger proportion of businesses in the future. They will be moving up the ranks in seniority and authority. So there's going to be more and more of a natural tendency. And then there is always the bottom line, the green eye shade people looking at the $1,000,000 they're spending on rent for the office every year and wondering, do we really need to spend all of that? So
Definitely. Totally, Mr. Ken, 100%. Totally empowering of what you're saying. And on research and writing process, how did you find and select the virtual companies you feature? How or where do you looking for specific sizes, industries, or unique cultural practices?
well, this book is not a heavily researched book in the academic sense. It is a book of my personal experience in the company by the name of OwnerRes that I was working in through the course of COVID and building as a fully remote company. So the research was my daily life working for that company. Of course, there was some
Mhm.
research. There were various facts and statistics that you get out there, and we have all our friends, Google and Chat GPT, to help with things like that. But no, I did not deal with a great deal of other remote companies. I know there are a great many at this point, but I liked the tools and the techniques that we developed at OwnerRes. And in the main, the book is based on those from the experience and the results that we saw.
Mr. Ken, many books discuss remote work. Yours focuses on virtual companies. Why was that distinction important to make, and what unique challenges these purely virtual models face?
Well, because if you have a hybrid model or you have an pre existing company, then you have other features involved because you have a shift and a change that is necessary. Consider a company that had existed, say, for 10 or 15 or 20 years before COVID in the traditional mode. You had an office, everybody went into the office, they all had office space or a cubicle, as the case may be. And then with the pandemic, it was shut down. All of a sudden, they had to all be working from home and figure it out. They already had established modes of management, established modes of working, established routines in life that were completely upended. They had to design a different way from scratch with very little warning, certainly no training, and as a going concern while keeping the business going. That is a very unique and a different sort of a challenge. For a virtual company, doesn't have that problem because it grows from scratch. It never has an office. It does not have to change from an old way to a new way. It is built entirely remotely from the get-go. A hybrid model would be somewhere in between, but even there you would have some people that prefer to be in the office, some people that prefer to be remote. There's going to be natural tension there. There's a lot of concern in some offices like that, well, if I'm not in the office, even if technically I'm allowed to work from home, the fact that I'm not in the office means nobody ever sees me. So I will get passed over for promotions. Maybe I will, I'll be the first to be laid off because nobody knows who I even am. And that can, to an extent, poison the well if it's not carefully managed. With a fully virtual company, there's none of that. Everybody works from home. Everybody's equal. Everybody is in their box on the Zoom screen. Everybody has the same rights and privileges of the comforts of their own home office, whatever it is. You don't have to worry about the person that is, in fact, in the office physically with the boss each and every day, and you aren't.
Interesting, Mr. Khan. And what does effective leadership and management look like in a virtual company? How do you build trust without resorting to digital surveillance or micromanagement?
Well, the micromanagement is a very key problem because the natural temptation is going to be, well, since I can't see them physically, I got to be watching what they do all the time. And there are many tools that allow that. We're all familiar with some of these tools on corporate computers, even to the extent of being able to see the screen at any moment, see what's on the screen, watch the mouse move. If you are spending your time as a boss monitoring your employees that way, then I really do have to wonder about your effectiveness, because what really matters is not what the employee is doing at any given moment in most cases. What matters is the output. How do you know that the employee is doing their job properly, correctly, and well? There must be some sort of an output. Is it entries on a spreadsheet? Is it reports? Is it number of customers talked to? And on a computer, there's going to be artifacts for that. Are there trouble tickets? Are there emails sent? Maybe they're a salesman. Well, at the end of the month, have they sold anything, or have they sold a lot or less? Have they met their quota? If they have, then they're doing their job. And if they haven't, then they're not doing their job. It doesn't matter whether they're in the office or they're not in the office. So as a boss, if you concern yourself with what you care about, with what the business requires, then a lot of these other issues are ancillary. They don't really matter. Now, sometimes they do matter. For example, if you're working on a call center and people are answering the phone, yes, it does matter if they're there during the times that the call center is open. That makes a difference. If they're working on, say, email support, then it matters significantly less. In fact, it can be put to the company's advantage. If somebody wants to work later in the evening, well, that allows you to have support in the evening, that otherwise it might just end at 5 p.m. So that can be a win-win for both of you. But thinking through the actual needs of the business as opposed to the habits of, well, it's the office and you have to show up at 9 and you have to leave at 5 because that's the way we've always done it. Does that matter to the business or doesn't it? Thinking through what's important is a good discipline that as bosses and really as human beings, we ought to do all the time. It's a little bit like your spring cleaning in your house. Well, have I used this in the last year? I must have thought I wanted it at one point, but I haven't used this in a long, long time. Maybe I need to get rid of it. Same is true in business. Well, this is the way we used to do things, and it made sense back in 1985. Maybe it doesn't make sense today.
Well, Mr. Khan, what does a truly effective onboarding process look like for a new hire who may never meet their colleagues in person?
Well, that's going to heavily depend on the nature of the job that they're being asked to do. But what I have found is that most of the tools that are used in remote companies are useful for training as well. Of course, we can have the Zoom calls. There would naturally be orientation conversations with, normally there would be a team lead or potentially a trainer that would have a Zoom call to discuss some of the basics. Probably you could imagine HR doing that to work through some of the briefings involved in onboarding. Through the nature of bringing on a new hire and selecting them, I've found that a more thorough interviewing process is helpful. And by the nature of that, by the time the employee comes on, they will have already spoken to many of the key people that they will be working with. So they won't be total strangers. One thing that I found very important was having as many live forums as reasonably feasible. Certainly weekly team meetings, if not daily team meetings. I liked to have a weekly all hands meeting. Depending on the size of the company, that may not be practical. But if there's an all hands meeting, then you can at least see the other people on the screen, hear from them, get some idea of what they do. And over time, that allows you to learn more about the company. One thing that, to my surprise, works fairly well is it is possible to have the Zoom sessions where you're sharing the screen, the video, and watching each other, but not necessarily sharing the screen that's being typed on. And just having the trainer live with the new employee, even if they're not working on the same thing, they can ask questions back and forth while they're working together. This is one advantage where technology has become so inexpensive. I suppose many of us are familiar with having multiple monitors. I myself have four. I don't know how many you've got, Daniel, but I can put I can put the video screen up on one monitor, which is what I've done here, and I can have another with notes over here, and one with a browser over there, perhaps, and one with documents down here. And that allows you to be able to be working while you are, in fact, on a call with somebody else. Now, that's rude to do. I wouldn't do that to you in this interview, Daniel. But but to do that while you're training somebody, once you've done the basics of the training, that way you're there, sort of. If they need to ask a question, they could just ask the question right then and there, and then you pay attention and look at it. It'd be a little bit analogous to sometimes you see this in a training situation where the new hire is working on a shared desk with the more senior person that's physically right next to them. It's the logical equivalent of that.
Mr. Ken, did you write the book while working remotely yourself, or how did your own environment influence your process and perspective?
Yes, I did indeed write the book while working remotely myself, and my personal environment. Well, yes, to some extent, it influenced the process, and it certainly influenced the perspective. In the whole perspective of the book is about remote work, but the process was related because from the nature of having remote work, you're going to have that is one difference where if you are physically in your office and you are meeting with somebody and your door is closed, mostly, unless it's a dire emergency, other people will leave you alone. They won't go banging on the door. With a virtual office, there are things you can do. For example, in chat, you can tag the chat and say, you're busy, leave me alone, but you're still going to have emails coming in and other things happening. So, writing the book, yes, it's possible to block off time and say, leave me alone. I'm going to be writing my book for the next 2 hours. But that's not really the way that I dealt with it. But I have done writing for articles in the past, and my own personal style, I tend to compose the book or large chunks of it sort of in my head. And so the physical writing is really just a matter of almost self-dictating, just getting it out of my head onto the page. I know that's different from many authors where they agonize over each word and sentence and they're creating it and then putting it immediately on the page. But I kind of do that asynchronously.
Was What was the most challenging chapter or concept to research and articulate clearly, Mr. Khan?
Well, for that, I'm actually going to compliment my editors, and by saying which one was the most challenging, I'll say it was the one that they liked the least, and we had to make the most changes to, and that was the one where I was talking about some of the legal implications to remote work and the legal advantages of it. Now, for the record, let me state I am not an attorney. I am not giving any legal advice, and I don't attempt to do that in the book either. There are many situations in which you need a lawyer. But also, there are a lot of common logical things that are relevant to remote work. For example, we've all heard of slip and fall lawyers where somebody walking into the office, they slip on the ice, the company gets sued and they have a liability. Well, if they're walking into their back bedroom to go to work, well, the injuries are not going to affect the company. If something happens, that's their own house. And there are many other situations like that where does it eliminate risk? Of course not, but it reduces it considerably. And my editors were quite concerned about that, and with some reason, certainly we don't want anybody to get the wrong impression that they're getting legal advice.
Yes, for sure. A legal advice. And for entrepreneurs starting a new company today, what is the first thing they should do build successfully as a virtual first organizations?
Well, I hate to give product recommendations, but I have to, particularly of a company that already has more than enough money than they need, and more than any of us will ever see. But I have to say that the Google Suite is kind of a one-stop shop. It does have at least a usable version of everything. It has Google Meet, which you can use for the virtual meetings. It has the chat. It has, of course, email. It has Google Docs, Google Sheets, all these things that can be shared live, and they all work extremely well in an always-on online environment for basically unlimited sharing. So that would be the very first thing that I would do. There are many, many, many other tools that are useful and relevant. They can be added later as needed. But if you are an entrepreneur that is starting, you're probably not going to have the resources for a whole lot of complexity. So maybe just paying the one bill to the giant Google is the easiest way to go to begin with.
Yes, for sure. And Mr. Ken, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, I loved building the business, and I don't mean that in the sales sense. Of course, sales are very important to building any business, but the structure of the business, building the organization, building the teams, putting the right people in the right seats, building the culture of the business as it grew. And I'm very much wanting to do that again. There are several startups that I'm working with now on an advisory capacity, and we will see what the future holds as far as which one or perhaps some other becomes a full-time gig where I can do what I did at Owner as building the business from a small to a larger size in the operational sense, picking the right people. I loved and was very privileged to work with the team there, and each person as we added them over time was a valuable addition. Every one of them mattered. Every one of them is vitally important. And that I think is the key takeaway, even more so than in an office business, in a remote business. Each individual human being matters, and the attention and the time needs to be paid to them.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Ken, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Well, I would advise them to keep an eye on what is going on out there and take advantage of the opportunities when things change, and things change faster and faster every day. And I know change can be very scary and frightening. And yes, even I do get a little overwhelmed by change at times. But the opportunities that they're in change to learn something and to do something that was rare before and that's hugely beneficial. Who knows what might come down the road that could happen? That could be another opportunity. COVID was a terrible thing in many ways, but it also created this opportunity for many people to live their best lives in a way that they couldn't before. And that may very well happen again, hopefully not quite so dire as that. But whenever there is change, try and look for the silver lining, try and look for the opportunity to make both yourself better and whatever your company and anything else that you're involved in to improve as well, rather than just run screaming in fear.
Well, thank you for that advice, Mr. Ken. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101 and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen to your podcast. So, Mr. Ken, if readers could only implement one idea from working and sleepers to improve their remote work experience, what would it be?
To consider what is important to the business and concentrate on that, and other things that are not necessary or important to the business to allow flexibility. You can improve your employees' lives free of charge.
Free of charge. I like it, Mr. Ken. Free of charge indeed. And one more. For traditional brick and mortar company considering for a full virtual chef, what is the biggest cultural hurdle they must overcome and how can they start?
The biggest cultural hurdle is going to be fear of massive change. Most people, they can deal with a little bit of change, but a whole huge change like that would be hard. But the advantage is most of us already went through that. Most of us were old enough to be working during COVID. And so it won't be quite the huge change that it was back then. It'll just be going back to something that they already had to do for a while. And maybe now we can learn the lessons and do it better than we did then.
Mr. Ken. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever your projects that you're doing right now? Mr. Khan?
Thank you. You can go to workinginslippers.com to order my book, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Ken Taylor because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more empowering business to come. So, Mr. Ken, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much as well, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.